This video is brought to you by Miniature Market. Thousands of board games, discounted prices, miniaturemarket.com.
Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today we're in the campground. We're all having fun trying to set up our tents really quick so we can hang out, have a good time, make some s'mores. But there's a maniac trying to kill us because it's last Friday. This is a game from Era's Games for 2 to 6 players. This was my #1 most anticipated game at Gen Con, and it's 1 player versus everybody. Let's take a look. I'll show you how it's played. I'll see you on the other side. At the beginning of the game, the side playing the campers will each select 1 character for each of the 5 different colors in the game. Each color has multiple characters they can select, and each character has a special token they can start with and a special ability. Regardless of the amount of players playing on this side, you always use all 5 campers. The side playing the maniac will have this shield to hide behind. It gives them information of how the rounds are played. It gives them a smaller map that they can look at without looking at the board, and it gives them some information about some of the cabins. My favorite part about this is there's a peephole that the maniac can look through and see where their pawns are, while this part sort of covers his eyes so that people can't see what he's looking at. Here's a map of the board set up for the first chapter. Each chapter can be up as long as 15 turns per chapter, and there's 4 different rounds or chapters that you might go through during the game. Now in the first chapter, all the pawns start in specific spots around the lake, and there's different welcome tokens that they'll be trying to find. That'll give them some special abilities, some keys to get in the cabins, but there'll also be some corpses there as well. Their goal is to find the keys and get safely into the cabins before they get murdered, and the maniac is trying to murder as many as they can. If the maniac murders all of them, the game will end immediately in this first round, but I've never seen that happen. In the first round, the campers move first in this order, and then the maniac moves in a hidden fashion behind the screen, and then it will be the next round. Each turn, the campers move in that order once, and when they move on these spots, these white dots, where the maniac will be moving from number to number. The campers can move in the dots. The campers can move up to 2 spots. So on, let's just say it was got around to Brown's turn, he could go, 1, 2, and that would be Brown's turn. And Blue had maybe already moved and stuff, but let's say it was a subsequent round. Brown can go 1, 2, and come to one of these welcome tokens and pick up something. Oh, it's a key. In this case, he could pick up a key. And since Brown has the key, he'd put it right on. Now Brown can unlock the yellow cabin. So now that Brown has the key for the yellow cabin, if he ever got to the yellow lock, he would be able to unlock this cabin and replace it here. And it's unlocked, the lights are on, and anywhere those lights are, if the maniac were to go there, he'd have to reveal himself. But the maniac has some things he can do too. He has an axe that he might be able to play, and if he got to any of these axe spots on the cabin, he would actually be able to axe down the door, meaning that the good guys cannot go in there. And in future rounds, the maniac can actually use this secret passage to go to another axed-in cabin. Now I have one of the very early copies, and so there was a mix-up with the cutting on the board. What's supposed to happen when the maniac moves is they're supposed to start at 0, and then they track their moves each round going up the different numbers. These are marked so that every 3rd round, the maniac's going to have to reveal something about himself depending on the round. And so they'll be doing that. Mine got cut sort of backwards, and so in this case I actually start here and I go back this way because it's a little hard to read. So I would choose where I start, and there's certain places you start in different rounds, and as I move each round I'm going to place the number here, and then we'll move it forward. And so this is a totally filled out sheet from a final game and such, but you'd be writing these in as you do your moves each round. Now in the first round, he's starting at any one of the many blood splat spots at the end of the boards, and that's where he would start. And when you move, the maniac does move, like I mentioned, to the different adjacent numbers, but he can only move 1 on normal. Where the campers are moving 2 spots, the maniac is moving on 1 number. Now these welcome tokens are mostly good. You might find keys as we showed you. They might be different things like shovels to help bury corpses, but somebody might find a corpse in there. Anytime a corpse blocks camper movement, they'd have to sort of move away from it, and it blocks this movement, but they are able to pick it up on their turn if they're adjacent to it and they have a shovel. They're able to essentially remove the corpse from the game. Campers are able to move using the boat to any one of these other docks from here. The maniac, 1 time per round, can swim from any of the numbered spots to anywhere else as well. Now in the first round, the campers are just trying to get inside a cabin. Once they are, their turns are basically over for this round. Now this was a yellow cabin. The brown had a yellow key. The only people that can go in this cabin is the one person that has the key and the actual camper of that color. So brown had the yellow key, he's in, and yellow could go in because it's their cabin after it's opened, and then these two players are safe. Now if at any point in time the maniac crosses over a camper, or a camper crosses over a maniac if he was here, then the maniac just puts a corpse pro token there, laughs and says you're dead, and takes out the guy, and that player is now done for the round as well. And if it gets to the end of the 15th turn, any campers still out in the area are dead, and then you would basically score the first round. So let's say it ended like this. 2 people were saved, and there's 4 corpses on there. There's more corpses than saved people. There's 4 corpses, 2 saved people. If you subtract those, that's 2 points towards the bad guy, because there's 4 versus 2, and he'd get 2 special tokens next round to use that we'll talk about later. If it were the other way around, there were more saved than this, they would get to look at certain clue tokens on the board and then put them back face down for later rounds to know where they are. Now those clue tokens come about because every 3rd turn in the first round, the maniac has to reveal where he was 3 rounds ago. So in the 3rd round, he'd have to reveal where he started with, and then he started here. So he would put his piece here to let everyone know, hey, I was there 3 rounds ago. And then he also puts a clue token at 1 spot adjacent. So these clue tokens are going to be coming out pretty much every time, every 3rd round. And so if those campers did well in the 1st round, they would get to look at any 1 clue token for every point they have, salvation points, and they'd see, oh, there's sneakers. We're going to talk about what all these different things do, but these clue tokens are around the board over the course of the game, and they help the campers. Now, when beginning the 2nd round, any of the campers that had died will show up as new campers. New campers come on the bus, and they'll pick new characters with new special abilities for that next round. Now here's a summary of all the chapters. The first one was the one we just talked about. In the 2nd chapter, and they all have sort of different setups of where people start, where, you know, and how things happen. But in this case, in the 2nd chapter, sort of a staging ground for the last 2 chapters. Essentially, the tide flips. The maniac is now being chased by the other people, and since it's daylight, every 3rd round, instead of putting this where he was 3 turns ago, he puts it on exactly where he is. And the other people are trying to basically pass over him. The maniac cannot kill him because it's dawn and they can see him well. And they basically are trying to pass over him, and if they do, the round ends. Now, if they're able to pass over him, 2 things happen. They get to keep all the clue tokens they have, and it stops the maniac from getting this invisible token, because if at the end of the 15th turn of this round, they have not caught the maniac, any clue tokens any of the campers have get washed away, completely removed, and the maniac will get this invisible token. It's really powerful because anytime during the game for a one-time use, they can use this when they're supposed to say where they are, because of the 3rd round thing. They basically play this instead and say nothing. So this is sort of a staging ground of setting up the rest of the 2 rounds, but the game can never end here. Now with that being said, each of these chapters have special rules that you can use to play them as individual scenarios where basically you don't want to play the full game, you can play every one of these additionally or on their own as a specific 1 chapter scenario. And then the setup and the rules are different. For example, in the 2nd chapter, if you want to play this as a 1 sort of 30 to 40 minute game, you can play this, and in this case, if they catch the maniac, then the maniac's dead and the game's over. But in the whole campaign, if you're playing all of them, he doesn't die here. Now in the 3rd chapter, it's similar to the 1st, where it's dark out and the maniac is trying to kill people. Essentially, after the 2nd round, one of the people is going to be what's called the predestined one. That's the person who ever caught the maniac in the previous round, or the person who was closest to him at the end of the round. And that predestined one is basically the target. If the maniac is able to cross over the predestined one, the maniac wins and the game's over. If the campers are able to pass over the camper, essentially they're able to make him reveal himself, and they get to basically push the maniac 1 spot closer to wherever they want. And if it gets to the final chapter, meaning that the maniac did not kill the predestined one, it flips again. It's dawn, he can be seen, and now the maniac is running from the campers again. The maniac can't cross over the campers. If a camper crosses the maniac, everybody else gets to move 1 spot closer. And if basically the predestined one passes over the maniac, the campers win. Otherwise, if that lasts 15 rounds, then the maniac wins. You can also win if everybody has completely surrounded the maniac and he cannot go, and I've seen somebody lose that way as well. But that's the different sort of the trajectory of the story and the different way the rounds play. Now let's look at the Maniac special abilities. We already talked about the Axe and the Invisible. Sneakers allows him to move 2 instead of 1. It's a one-time use type of thing. And again, if he uses it, he kind of places it there so they know that he moved 2. This one here allows him to, if he places it when he's supposed to tell him where he is, he can say where he is 1 adjacent to where he truly is, so it confuses them. This is the plot twist. You would place at the end of the round. At the end of the 15th round, he can play this at the very end of the game, or the end of the round there, and get 1 more move. Now let's take a look at the campers. Some of them have special abilities like, hey, after he removes a corpse token, he can move 1 dot further. He starts with the shovel. We showed you how the shovel removes corpses, and those corpses block movement. We have Susan here. When she's eliminated from the game, all campers immediately move 1 white dot. She starts with hearing, and when she plays that token, if the maniac is within 1 spot adjacent to that, he basically says yes or no, whether they're there, but not the exact spot. When sprinting, when using a sneakers token, she moves additional 2 white dots instead of 1. Sneakers allows you to move, instead of going 2 dots, you move 3. So this lady actually gets to move 2 extra moves, so 4 dots in 1 move if she has the sneakers. Alice, when the maniac removes a bear trap, she must move 1 white dot. Now bear traps get put down and basically the maniac cannot go through them. Essentially it blocks them. He can remove them, but it takes him a full turn to do so. And then we have Annie. After placing a lantern token, she can move 1 white dot further. Placing lanterns are pretty powerful. Now when they place a lantern token, they can place it on an adjacent dot to where they are, and then they can light up every number that's adjacent. So in this case, all these spots now get these yellow tokens, and if the maniac is to go through any of those, it must reveal that he was there. And that's the overview of all the different things that happens in Last Friday. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning, this was my #1 game that I was anticipating at Gen Con because I love hidden movement games. Letters from Whitechapel is one of my favorite games of all time. I really love Spectre Ops, even Clue Museum Caper from the 90s. I just love hidden movement, I love deduction, and this looks like it was going to do it in such a different way that looks so interesting to me. So let me first talk about all the things I like about the game. Now, the game itself just is interesting to me because it took hidden movement and flipped it on its head. It so changes it, where, Whitechapel, you're Jack running around in hidden movement and they're chasing you. But the game starts off the exact opposite, puts it on its head where you're hidden and you're trying to chase them and kill them, and I like that aspect of it, how it switches it up. I also like the aspect that it changes over the games, where some of the rounds I'm trying to, the maniac's trying to kill the campers, and the other round he's trying to get away from the campers or even try not to be, killed by them. And I like that back and forth where it really changes how things work. I like how thematic this game is. I like how there's special abilities and tokens where the campers can go around and use the lantern to light up things, which makes it hard for the maniac to sneak through those things. I also like how there's things like the maniac can axe through cabbage, which will give him secret passages through the other way, that he can swim. There's certain tricks that he can do. Now this game's obviously going to be mostly compared to those types of games because it's really standing on its shoulders. If you look at the board game design, you look at how things are done, you pretty much will look at it and go, oh, that looks like the Whitechapel board. The numbers, the maniac goes through, and the little spots the people go through. And it very much feels like that from that general mechanic, but then it goes into a lot of other things. Now the rounds themselves are interesting. I really like the fact that you can play this game as a full scenario, going through all the chapters, which will take you probably 90 minutes to 2 hours. Or you can play just one chapter, and each chapter has special rules of how you set up and what the end game goal is for that one scenario. So if you want to just play a 30-minute version, you can do that. So overall, I liked those aspects of it. I did have some issues with the game. Let me just go through those. First of all, the second round, these games are supposed to feel very tense. In Whitechapel, I'm sweating the whole time. Spectre Ops, I'm sweating the whole time. That's what makes those games so good, is the terror in them. And this game's supposed to be a slasher scary thing. In the second round, there's no way for the maniac to die unless you're playing the single one round thing. But if you're playing a scenario, there's no way to die. The worst that can happen is you don't get an invisible token and the other people are going to keep all their tokens. Where if I do escape, I get to wipe off all their tokens and get an invisible token. Yeah, that's cool, but even in last night's game, I was the maniac and I got caught in the second round. It was very close, and even then it was a little bit tense, but it wasn't as tense if I felt like the game was on the line. So even in moments of tenseness in that second round, I didn't like it. I understand they did it for thematic reasons. I understand that they did it because they're setting up the future rounds of what you're gonna get. But I felt like it really just made the game 30 minutes longer than it really needed to be, because that round, yeah, you're setting things up, but it really took the tension out of the game. Now, tension itself, there are moments where you will feel very tense in this, but I feel like those moments were far and few between. Lots of times, it just really feels hard on both sides, actually. When you're on one side, you're like, oh, I can only move one. You're on the maniac side. And the other side, you're like, oh, I don't know where he is. And, so it feels equally hard for both sides. But unlike Whitechapel, where you're narrowing things down and kind of cornering him over the rounds, this is like you got a free-for-all. You're just sort of running around. And a lot of things bear on whether you get the second axe. Can the maniac get a second axe and get into another room to allow him to escape to another room and give him another trick up his sleeve. If not, it's going to be really hard. If he doesn't get the invisible token, it's going to be really hard on him. So a lot of things, that second round is very important for how the game ends, but it's just like you got to play 30 minutes to figure out if you're going to get the stuff you need to make the game easier or harder for you. I didn't like that aspect of it, and I felt like the game wasn't as tense as I would like it to be, or as some of the other predecessors of this genre are. So overall, it's a good game. I love the genre. I love the things they did thematically. I love the special abilities. I love the tokens. I like a lot of this game. I love the back and forth changing things. But in the end, it wasn't quite as tense as I wanted it to, and I really disliked that second round, even though I've spoken with the publisher to make sure I got everything right, and I understand what they were doing there. It's just, I would like it to be tense all the time, pedal to the metal like some of the other games in this genre, and it didn't do that for me. This is not to say don't get this game. This is not to say don't try this game. If you like hidden movement, one thing I will say is that I've always felt that Whitechapel and Spectre Ops, I always like those best at 2 players. This is one of those games that I actually feel like it's better with more players, because every camper gets special abilities, every camper gets their own tokens, and if there's one player running all of that, it's just a little too much to think about. So in this game, if you like hidden movement, but you wanted to play better with more players, this is the one for that. I think it plays with more players better than the others. Whitechapel, if one player runs each person, none of them have special abilities, you can be out in the middle of nowhere and your turns are boring. Where here you're going around, you're collecting clues, and doing other things. So I will say they did that better, for sure. It plays better with more people. So that's that. I just wish it was a little more tense. I wish that second round really wasn't there, or I guess you could just say if he catches you, you die, but I don't like to break rules. That's the way they designed the game. So overall, I liked it, I enjoyed it, but it's not going to knock off the best ones of the genre, in my opinion, but it might for some. Who knows? You got to try it and figure it out, but that's what I liked and what I didn't like, and that's last Friday.
This video was sponsored by Miniature Market's Review Corner. The Review Corner features podcasts, video, and written game reviews by gamers for gamers. Miniature Market, the online gaming superstore. Thousands of board games, discounted prices. Check them out at miniaturemarket.com. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for backing me on Kickstarter, making this season become a reality. I'd like to especially thank those here that have backed me at the credit level. Now, these video reviews are also available by audio on our podcast. It's the intros and the final thoughts on GameBoyGeek.com. Click podcast.